everybody, Melissa McLeod here, and today I want to show you everything you need to know about using a miter saw. So what is a miter saw? A miter saw is a saw that lets you cut across the board at a 90-degree angle or any other angles like a 45-degree angle. But what you can't do with a miter saw is cut lengthwise, do a rip cut on the board. That just wouldn't be safe, and you would need to go to the table saw for that. So let's talk about the parts of a miter saw. Here we have the blade and the blade guard. And when I pull this down, notice that the blade guard comes up, protecting me here in the front from the blade, but allowing the blade here to cut my material. Next, we have the angle gauge. There's a little lever under here that you can pull to move it. And some of these angles that are very common, it will stop on its own and lock into place. Like 45 is very common. But when I'm doing this, I'm pulling up on this little lever. Next, we have the fence here, which helps keep the board stable and steady and even for me to make my cut. Then of course we have our handle, and inside the handle there's this switch that you pull up while simultaneously pulling this to activate your saw. And one more thing about this particular saw in the shop is it's actually a sliding compound miter saw, which allows us to cut much wider boards. We slide it out, pull it down, and then cut across the width of the board. So now let's talk about the types of cuts. The first type of cut is a cross cut, which is basically a 90-degree cut across the board. Next, we have a miter cut, which is basically an angled cut across the board. A very common angle is 45 degrees. Okay, so say you do not want the sliding feature. You can come over to this knob, tighten it down, that way it won't move. Then when you get ready to start your saw, make sure with your left hand you're holding your board down against the table and holding onto the fence so this won't move. And then you start your saw, let it get to full speed, and pull it down slowly and cut your board. But what you want to be careful not to do is have your hands crossed this way. You never want to have any body parts in the path of the saw. That's just asking for an amputation or an injury or a bad situation, period. Okay, there's one more thing you need to understand before we start making cuts, and that is the kerf. What is the kerf? The kerf is the part of the board that turns into sawdust, the width that you lose from the blade itself. So if you have a board that is, say, 10 inches and you need two 5-inch boards, that's going to be impossible because you're going to lose that little bit. So that's important to know as you're measuring. So taking the kerf into account, this is the part I need to keep, and I need my measurements to be exactly right. So I'm going to pull this down in a dry run and see that the blade is coming on the outside of my line so I don't lose any material here due to the kerf. The part of the board here that has now been turned into sawdust, that is exactly the width of the blade, is your kerf.